Good evening and welcome to the What's Happening show. On tonight's program we feature the recent visit of Pope John Paul. We also welcome to our studio guests from the local parish. Join us now, won't you, for the What's Happening show. As well as we welcome to our studio the programs coordinator for the Abbotsford event, Graham Cook, and Father Ashley from the St. Anne's Catholic Church. Job given to you of putting 150,000 people in the Abbotsford International Airport. Where would you start? Well, you've got the empty field, but you've got to put 150,000 people in there. You have to find someone who's going to coordinate those 150,000 to 200,000 people arriving at that airport and really feel like you were expecting them. Today we have the privilege of meeting the production and program coordinator for the Abbotsford event, Graham Cook. Graham, when you first started talking and thinking about what you were going to do with all these people who are going to arrive at the Abbotsford International Airport, at what point did you join the festival of getting ready?
Well, I came into it very late. Most people had been working on it for approximately a year and in various committees, and they decided that they needed a coordinator to tie the various aspects together. And I had just moved back here from London, Ontario, and volunteered as a crowd marshal, but I'd put some of my background on the form, and the computer popped my name up, and I was given a phone call and asked if I wanted to basically stage manage the Monday night event, which was entertainment, and that's how I got started. It was sort of like getting thrown into a pool full of alligators as the way things grew, because I didn't know much about it at the time. And I found that the most difficult aspect coming in late is everyone else knew everyone else. I didn't know anyone. I didn't know what anyone was doing, and that was the hardest part. In fact, I almost quit after 3 days because it just seemed insurmountable trying to tie it all together. There was just so much detail. And then it was just a matter of going to various committees, various priests, various choir directors, various people all over the city of Vancouver. I put in hundreds of miles. A lot of people, all these committees, and talking to each one of them and finding out what they were doing so I could see what I was doing. Because nobody really knew or had an overview, an overall picture. I could ask someone about, the Tuesday morning, for instance. I could find one person who might know about what was happening between 9 and 10 a.m. But then I had to go to someone else to find out what was happening from 10 to 11, or what they expected to happen. And it became up to me to see that it did happen. And then I had the added fun of dealing with a number of ethnic groups in which we got into a language problem, because they did not understand English very well, and I certainly did not know Croatian or Portuguese or Spanish or Chinese, etc. There was all these various groups that I was dealing with, so communication became very interesting.
Yeah, let's just back up to the gate, and if we kind of take a stroll through the airport the day, but look behind the scenes for your knowledge of how it all came together. How did they decide right from the gate right through? Was there there must have been a planner, a designer for building the areas where the spectators were put into the different corral areas. Let's talk about the barrier system first.
Okay, the barrier system actually came about because it's an adaptation of what is done at St. Peter's Square in Rome. They use colored barricades there for a much smaller crowd, of course, and that's where the basic idea of the corrals or enclosures came from. They were in blocks of 4, each single one holding 1,000 people, and within each corral there would be 4 crowd marshals, 1 captain in charge of a group of 4, a couple of first aid attendants, and by breaking it down like that, it became possible to handle the crowds. So we had no power out there except generators until the Sunday night, and this created a few problems, for instance, with the sound technicians. The generators were not adequate to power the sound system, so the sound system could not be checked until the power was in, so it was very last minute. We got everything ready that we could and then waited. And they had done partial checks on them by running a portable generator around each tower and checking each speaker individually, but the overall testing of the system could not be done until, so we waited. Monday morning was basically it.
So then all the running began on the total barrier system.
Yes.
Okay, let's back up now and we'll take the same procedure with the concessions. How you were talking about there being a problem there language-wise, but was there some kind of restrictions and rules set up for concessions?
Well, the concessions were food concessions and souvenir concessions, and there were restrictions set upon them by the Papal Mass Committee, such as pricing and what they were allowed to sell.
Did the same person design the in and out procedure for the concessions as designed the barrier system?
The architects, in conjunction with the fellow who was doing the food concessions, basically they discussed how it functionally could work, and they decided they would do a lot of concession stands rather than just a few, and so that they actually became part of the design of the event. If you looked at it, you were surrounded by this sea of blue plastic with gold banners and everything. It was all tied in to be color coordinated. And the concessions were nothing but sheds, really, that everything had to be brought in. The stoves and the propane, all that was brought in, all the food, all the refrigeration trucks, everything was brought in, and they went from scratch. We were working from an empty field up to you know, a mini restaurant in each of the concession stands.
Okay, now the highlight, as far as I'm concerned, was the setup for the washrooms. Now that to me was a very important area to be taken care of logistically. In working with the air show, they've always had this problem with the washroom facilities, and I was really waiting to see what was going to happen with this visit, and I must admit that everything was just perfectly set up with the washroom system.
Well, there was enough washrooms, which was important. And
the actual stage itself, that must have been quite something to construct.
One area was meant to house 575 choir members, and the equivalent area on the other side housed approximately 500 priests, with the central podium area leading up to the sanctuary where the bishops and the Holy Father conducted the Mass.
As the program coordinator for the Abbotsford event, your summation, was it successful? Was it what you wanted? Would you do it again?
Yes, now that we know how to do it, we can do it right next time. There were no major problems. Any of the problems were the type of thing that were foreseen and were coped with. There was nothing disastrous happened. Nothing even close to disastrous happened. There was probably the only thing I would have liked to smooth out a little bit was the Monday night event, which was a combination of choirs and entertainers and a rosary procession. There were about 10-minute pauses between each group just because of sound setup, and there was no way to avoid that because we were not working in a theater where you can have it set up ahead of time, and it was just a matter of the 10-minute pauses were not disastrous, but I would have liked them to be 5 minutes, and that's a very minor thing compared to the overall event. The actual Tuesday worked fine. There's no problems. We had no problems with the crowds. We had no problems with the performers or the people involved in the Mass. We even managed to get all the priests out to the enclosures to give out communion without any problem.
Very well done. Very well done. Graham, welcome to our area. I understand that you're new here, but you're also planning on staying in the area.
Yes.
So welcome to our area, and I'm sure that we're going to see more of you. You look like the type that's going to come in and help us organize a few of our local events.
I hope so.
I hope so. Graham, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I am deeply grateful for the hospitality extended to me and for the invitation to celebrate this Eucharist. And it is in this context of public worship that I have come to you to proclaim Jesus Christ, the eternal Son of God, to proclaim the invisible God whom he reveals, and to proclaim the divine love that he communicates to the world in the mystery of his sacred heart.
Many people within this parish were extremely busy before, during, and probably after the Mass presented by Pope John Paul II. The Father William Ashley from St. Anne's Church has now joined us, and you had many visitors to your parish before the Mass, and probably many people came in to ask you after the Mass, what was the message from Pope John Paul II?
Yeah, well, I think the best way to summarize the message that he gave at the airport was that he told us that the central doctrine or belief of the Catholic Church is that Jesus Christ is the beginning and the end, as St. John writes in the Apocalypse. And so he pointed out in his homily at the Mass, in which he emphasized devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus being the symbol of the love of Jesus Christ for humanity. He pointed out in that how Jesus Christ then is meant to be the center of our religion. Of course, without Jesus Christ, the Church will be nothing. I think that the reaction overall of most people was very positive for a Catholic, and then of course even other Christians get sort of swept up until once they realize what's going on. But for a Catholic, especially when you realize, see, that the man is the successor of St. Peter, as the Bishop of Rome. Just after St. Peter was martyred, they elected another pope, and after that pope, that was Linus, I believe, after he was martyred, they elected another one. You have this unbroken chain of what we call apostolic succession from the See of Rome right down to the present time. And of course that was going through my mind when I was witnessing the Holy Father come up in the Pope mobile through the crowds, that of course I'm always like that, my eyes sort of well up with a few tears, because you realize, you know, that this is the Vicar of Christ, that he is the Bishop of Rome, and that he is the visible head of the Church here in this world. So it's a wonderful thing. I guess for me personally it has another connection too, that I was ordained a priest at St. Peter's in Rome by a French-Canadian Archbishop Edward Gagnon, and I wanted to be ordained there because of the tie-in with the successor of Peter and the whole nature of the hierarchical structure of the Church. But it was just a wonderful thing.
Our thanks to Graham Cook and Father William Ashley for joining us for the Papal Visit commentary on tonight's program. We thank you for joining us. Join us again next week for What's Happening.
Lord Jesus Christ, eternal Son of the eternal Father, born of the Virgin Mary, we ask you to continue to reveal to us the mystery of God, so that we may recognize in you the image of the invisible God, that we may find him in you, in your divine person, in the warmth of your heart, heart of Jesus, in whom dwells the fullness of divinity, heart of Jesus, heart of Jesus, King and Center of all hearts, forever and ever. Amen.